This week on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast, we have Mr. Jim Park, an independent trucking journalist, joining us. And this is the second interview of a two-part series. Jim's got so much knowledge and is, I believe, one of the premier journalists in the trucking industry. And we're talking about AI and dash cams and all kinds of stuff, how the future is affecting truck drivers. So stay with us. Jim Park, independent trucking journalist, is with us this week.
Welcome to the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast.
Jim, welcome back. And I just want to finish our conversation that we were having. The first episode, we were talking more about the environment, electric and hydrogen and natural gas, or RNG as you called it. But now I want to switch subjects and get into safety. You were just at a show recently down in California, and you said you saw a lot of safety items that are coming, and you also know a lot of truck drivers and how they might accept it. Do you want to talk about what you saw, what is coming, or what's here and available?
Yeah, sure. That show was ACT Expo in Anaheim, Advanced Clean Transportation Expo. So the show was focused mostly on stuff we talked about in the last episode. But all the trucks on the floor had all these advanced new safety systems on them. It's like, you want an electric truck, it's going to come with all this safety stuff too.
Right.
TMC earlier this year, beginning of March, I took a ride in the Nikola truck. It was had a little ride and drive set up for the media. But it wasn't just the Nikola. It was a Nikola truck with the Plus AI. Oh, they had a name for it now, and it escapes me. It was, the Plus is an autonomous truck producer. Well, they've scaled down some of that artificial intelligence and built it into an advanced driver assistance system, sort of module, and put it on the Nikola. So it's got essentially predictive capability rather than just reactive, which is pretty interesting, I think. I didn't actually drive the thing. They had a demonstrator driver in there because it's still in a alpha stage prototyping it. They didn't want to turn me loose with it.
It was probably a good choice on their part, but go ahead.
Probably. I might have tipped the thing over, or at least tried to see if it worked. But
that's a little
we're all more or less familiar with now the things like adaptive cruise control that'll maintain a preset following distance based on speed. We have automatic emergency braking technology now, where it will detect a rapid approach on a stopped or slow moving vehicle, apply the brakes right down to 0 mph, to get the thing stopped. Maybe not prevent the collision, but mitigate the damage anyway, not hit quite so hard. And then the stability control derivatives, where if you go into an off-ramp too fast and the truck starts to lean, outside a certain envelope, the system kicks in, fires off some strategically brake applications, and prevents a rollover. So, who can argue with that? Except when you're the driver and these systems keep going off on you.
Right.
Well, what the experts will tell you is you're at the threshold, driver. That's why the system kicked in. If you stayed below the threshold, that wouldn't happen.
Well, one of the complaints, Jim, I've heard from drivers, and it's specifically the adaptive cruise control, is when they've got that nice space in front of the truck, the safety space, the one that John and I keep preaching drivers should have, God damn it, a vehicle cuts in short, and all of a sudden the tractor brakes are applied, and it shocks the heck out of the driver because they weren't really prepared for it. Is there technology coming down the pipe that might help that? Because that's one of the things that I hear from drivers frequently.
Yeah, a screwdriver. Just jam it right through the box and be done with it.
So,
gospel according to Jim.
Yeah.
No, you're right. Chris, and that is a real problem. And even the advocates admit it. And Virginia Tech Transportation Institute did a study on these systems a few years ago and found a lot of false positives, and even real positives like you described that really aren't that much of a threat at the end of the day. But the systems react to them anyway. I don't know if there is an answer to that. The people you talk to who produce these systems say they're working on making it more predictive as opposed to reactive, which is what the AI thing is all about. I'll get into that in a second. The way these systems work is you've got a combination of, a camera or two up in the windshield.
Right.
There we go. I'm trying to stay centered here. And you've got a radar device probably, or a LiDAR somewhere down on the bumper. And it measures distance and time and reacts to something that's getting in front of the vehicle. And it decides at some point that, hey, you're too close to this, time to back off. I've had experiences, mind you, this was earlier bits of the technology, but it's still valid, I think. Rolling out a hill, picking up some speed, saving some fuel on the downside of a hill, come up the other side, you're still coasting, you haven't got your foot back on the accelerator yet, and you come up on a car that's ahead of you on the hill because you've gained speed coming down. Well, partway up the hill, the jakes come on, the engine brakes come on. So all that momentum that I had coming down the hill, all that beautiful fuel that I saved, now I got to spool up my turbo and, drop a couple of gears and creep up this hill. I'm going like, tell me this is good for me.
Yeah.
I think in a situation like that, where the driver is on top of the situation, driving the truck, there should be an override button I can hit. There isn't. Just for like 10 seconds. Hit the button, system shuts off, driver's obviously aware of what's going on. I mean, that car in front of you on the hill is not going to stop. It poses no threat other than it's closer than the system is comfortable with. Out on the highway, when some moron pulls in front of you, brake checks you. I don't know, really, short of, because you couldn't react fast enough to hit the override button in a situation like that most of the time. So that really wouldn't help all that much.
Yeah.
It's true. If the car pulls in front of the truck and is accelerating, the system will ignore it.
Yes. Okay.
But if it pulls in front of the truck and decelerates or stays put, then the system will respond, back the truck off until that safety's, that cushion's been reopening. I found driving those trucks on long stretches of open road where you've got your cruise control set for X. You creep up behind somebody, some distance away, a mile, half a mile ahead. The system responds, sees the thing ahead, the Winnebago out there, quarter mile out, and it slows you down, backs you down almost imperceptibly. So, you're doing 75 through Nevada on the interstate, everything's good. And then suddenly you realize you're doing 55. How did I get down to 55? Because the old fart in the Winnebago's doing 55 and you happen to be 100 and, half a kilometer behind them. Well, geez, pull out, get in the left lane, truck hammer down, let's go. Get past this turkey. Yeah. But it happens so subtly, you don't even realize it sometimes.
Well, how's AI going to change all that? You were saying you had some experience with AI, artificial intelligence, for those who are listening that don't know what AI stands for. How is that going to be more predictive and less reactive?
Well, this really is above my pay grade, but I'll try and relate to what they were telling me. In the course of teaching machine learning, the process that these autonomous trucks learn to drive on the interstates with, every scenario that happens, every second of a trip is recorded somewhere in the computer. So it's analyzing all the time what's happening. And it can get to the point where machine learning, artificial intelligence, which is where I part company with this. I don't understand it. But it will, because it's seen this scenario happen 10 million times already, recognizes that the next move that car is likely to make has a high probability of being X. So if the car pulls in front of the truck, making a lane change, the truck recognizes that it's approaching an exit ramp, for example. Truck will say, the artificial intelligence will go, oh, well, this guy's probably just pulling in front of me now because he wants to get off here at this freeway. And as long as we keep a reasonable distance, I'll just ignore it for the time being, but I'm going to keep my eye on it just in case he pulls a fast one.
Sure.
And I know I can react faster than the driver can. So there's a bit of latitude in there that today's reactive safety systems don't have. And they look for cues, like the cameras on these trucks. They'll detect if a driver's head turns in the car, like he's looking at his mirror. So that sets a trigger to the AI that, oh, this driver is likely to make a lane change because he's looking in his mirror.
Yeah. Well,
okay, high alert. Now we've got to watch this car, whereas before we could sort of ignore it. And if, boom, the lane change does happen, it's looking for the next move, which is the next lane out of the path of the truck. So it's more likely to let you go, let that truck go, that car go without putting on the brakes. And
I was going to say, Jim, it would be really nice if people did look in the bloody mirror before they made the lane change. But
indeed.
That would be handy.
Even variations in the path of the car, they were telling. You know, when you're driving, and if you look to the left, your hands always go to the left or right. So what does that do? But it changes the directional vector of the car. So the AI is watching it. All of a sudden, the car is varied now 2 centimeters to the left.
Sure.
Oh, sure. The guy's making a lane change. And it's that sensitive. They can detect that kind of stuff.
Yep.
Which is mind-boggling to me. But again, even probably with the stability system, if the truck is equipped with enough sensors, going back to our conversation earlier about my coffee mug, you know, if I don't want to plug anybody, so if the system knows where the weight is on the truck, how it's been performing, if it's swaying in a turn, if you're loaded top heavy, you know, high center of gravity, the system might be a little bit more sensitive than if you had a flatbed with, you know, steel plate on it and very low center of gravity.
Yeah.
It can figure itself out and understand the dynamics of the vehicle. I mean, a driver should be able to do that, right? But we've seen, I guess, in the last 10 or 15 years, a pretty dramatic decline in the cognizant capabilities. This is something I'm trying to be polite here.
Well, I think some of the drivers have moved from being what we were in our younger days to steering wheel holders.
Yeah.
And
well, we've made them that way, though.
Yes.
We've encouraged that kind of behavior.
Yeah. Well, these vehicles are too easy to drive, you know. I was actually just having this conversation with some folks last week, and they were kind of understanding, why is it so easy to drive these trucks now? So it's like driving a car, you know. And there's no big stick in there anymore. The big gear shift of having to shift 18 gears made you think about what you were doing all the time. I had to be aware, what gear am I in? I got to slow down. Okay, I'm in 15. I got to get down to 13 because I got to get this hill. That thought process is no longer there. And we've made these trucks much more comfortable to operate. They're much safer to operate. That I think people are reverting back to, it's like driving my Toyota. You know, it's got all the same features as my Toyota. I think it's a Toyota until all of a sudden it's not a Toyota and I can't react fast enough to what's going on. As simple as turning a corner. I take it too sharp and go, oh, shoot, I forgot I had the 53-foot trailer on there. You know?
Yeah.
Or the 60-foot trailer.
Yeah, the 60-foot.
No, yeah. Yeah.
So, but yeah. Well, and I guess one of the things that I see too often, Jim, and correct me if I'm wrong, we have a lot of new gadgetry in the vehicle. We have a lot of new safety features in the vehicle. Are they not also creating a distraction?
I've wondered about that. I have to admit, I don't have enough time behind the wheel, like weeks time, to sort of get used to these alerts that come through. when I drive a truck now, it's typically for a few hours or maybe a day. So it's all pretty new to me. And I find some of the warnings at first, they're annoying. And then I find sometimes by the end of the day, I don't even hear them anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like I've tuned them out. So what do you do then? Make it louder, make it more obvious?
Well, I know in speaking with some clients on my side of the table, they've turned those alerts off because drivers are annoyed with them and they want them turned off. So now it's defeating the purpose of that device, overspeeding, distracted driving, things along that line. And that's an unfortunate aspect. And I think one of the other problems we have is we have so much technology in these trucks that even the owners of these trucks don't know how well advanced they are. So there's no training for the drivers that are going to operate these trucks of all the items they need to be aware of.
That's my biggest pet peeve right now with these safety systems or even, the advanced driving systems. From what I hear, fleets still just hand the drivers the keys and say, call me when you get to Chicago. Don't knock anything over. Brand new truck, no idea. Yeah. And, these safety systems evolve model year to model year, right? Mm-hmm. So you get out of a, 2014 Cascadia into a 2018 Cascadia. It's got a different system on it. It works differently. It's going to react differently.
Yeah.
Get into a 2023 Cascadia and it's even more different. So does anybody ever take you aside and show you the video, or they just expect you to go and watch the safety videos on your own time?
Yeah. I remember years ago, I had a client who had the radar system on the both sides and the front, and the drivers were complaining of this noise beeping, and they weren't contributing it to anything in particular. And it was interesting because the safety guy says, well, I don't know, I'll put you through to the mechanic. And the mechanic goes, oh yeah, it's some stupid devices on the truck. Just grab yourself some tin foil and duct tape, cover it up, and the noise will go away. That was their cure, rather than explaining what it was all about. So, again, driver sent out with a new truck and no proper training. Chris, you were going to add to that.
Yeah, now I forget. So I'll throw it back to Jim.
Well, what do the fleets expect? If there's a problem, safety problem, throw technology at it. It's cheaper than training, right?
Well, and now that Jim brought that up, I do remember what I was going to say. And it is a shame that they spend all this money. I mean, it's over $300,000 for a new tractor right now. And they give the keys to the driver and they give it to a senior driver, as kind of a reward. And that's the end of it. As you said, Jim, they don't train the senior driver on the new items that are there, how they work, why they work, and to John's point with these alarms going off, how you can avoid setting the alarms off, right? Like, you're right. Where is the training? And I bet you the manufacturer has it, but if the company would at least give the driver as a minimum, here's the website, go check these things out. You can figure it out, I'm sure. But they don't even do that.
I do know, just from experience, that Freightliner has a site you can go to that's actually based on your vehicle VIN number.
Oh.
And if you type the VIN number in, it will give you the active features that are on that truck. Not a sort of one size fits all global picture. You can actually drill right down into the systems that are on board that truck with that VIN number.
Did you hear that, drivers?
Yeah.
And if Jim's really kind, he'll send me the website address and I'll include that in the show notes. Well, no, I think that's huge.
Yeah, I'll try and find that for you.
Yeah, I mean, if they've got it, I'll bet you most drivers don't know it's available. And between Jim and I, hopefully we can find it and I'll put it in the show notes for you so that you can take a look at your truck and see what is available.
But of course, that's only applicable to the Cascadia models.
Right.
Not going to help you with the Kenworth.
No. But the bonus part is we know there's a lot of Cascadias out there.
Yeah. Well, PACCAR may have something similar too. I don't know for sure. I haven't been there. I have been to the Daimler site, the Freightliner site.
Sure.
But again, it's, I think, left to the driver's curiosity to go there and look. Probably, they'll be told, well, during your 10-hour break, log into this website and watch these training videos. Yeah, we're not paying you, but log in and learn something. Perfect. I don't need to. I'm making enough money driving down the road. I don't need to do that while I'm sitting still.
That's right.
I mean,
That's right.
That's kind of a poor attitude, but I mean, the training is there. If the fleets would just A, insist the drivers do it, B, pay them for doing it, and maybe follow up with a quiz, next week. What does this sound mean? What does that sound do? And what happens if you get it too close to the truck in front of you? What is your truck going to do?
I
remember once being absolutely scared the crap out of me. A car cut in front of me, like John described earlier. Well, the truck made a 30 or 40 pound brake application. I thought I'd hit the car. So for the next 10 seconds, I'm craning my neck out to see debris or something coming out from under my wheels, because it was a real jolt when the brakes came on. And I thought, okay, I just hit something, but what? I don't see any signs of it. I rattled my cage, I'll tell you.
Yep.
And then I spent the next, like I said, 10 seconds or so looking everywhere but right out in front of me.
Well,
for
and
some evidence of what it just, how safe is that?
Yeah. And trying to calm your heart rate down. I mean, old farts like me would have a heart attack,
Yeah. Like I said, it was shocking and utterly unnecessary.
I was going to say, so that just became a huge distraction for you.
Completely, absolutely.
Took your mind off the road, and you're now focusing for something else, going, where's the debris? Did I hit somebody? Did I take somebody out? So, when now all of a sudden we could be getting into a situation that could cause us real harm.
Well, it was somewhere in North Carolina through Charlotte, so the traffic was busy. There was lots of very dynamic situation, so lots to look out. Now, mind you, that was 4 or 5 years ago. It wasn't the newest technology, but still. The other problem is the overpass detectors. When you've got these systems that aren't calibrated properly, or for some reason they'll pick up an overpass or a roadside overhead sign and slam the brakes on out of the blue for no particular reason. I'm seeing less of that, but it's happening still. It's a problem, especially with the older systems. The other problem with those things is if you're in an accident and the body shop has to calibrate those gauges again properly, the sensors, the radar thing in the front. So if the bumper is not bolted on exactly, sorry, my camera is reversed here. If the bumper is not bolted on exactly as it should be, and the sensor completely aligned, or if your frame is slightly off kilt, whatever is wrong with it, if it's pointing a couple of degrees higher than it should, it's going to pick up all the overhead signs. And that's something that a lot of, I've written a couple articles about repairing this technology, side sensors and everything the same way. You have to be really, really careful when you're putting the thing back together, that you calibrate everything properly and align it properly. The old days when you used to have to align your headlights, you'd park the truck close to a wall and get a Phillips screwdriver. It's the same thing with these sensors. They've got to be calibrated and adjusted properly.
A lot of precision.
And I would imagine that's a lot of training for the technician to know what the heck to do and how to do it right.
Well, if you go to Al's body shop, and cousin owns the place, he can do the job $50 cheaper. Chances are he doesn't know how to calibrate that.
Right. Yep. Yeah, exactly.
What else is coming down, Jim, with regards to AI that drivers would like to know?
Well, I think AI, when you talk about autonomous trucks, drivers are naturally concerned about their own futures. Are the AI going to take over the world? Most people are saying no, and I'm inclined to agree. It'll be decades, not years, decades before they have trucks driving around city streets by themselves. There's a pretty good business case to be made for running trucks between, hub and spoke points like Phoenix to Dallas, for example. Pick two destinations, Chicago and Reno. I don't know. Drivers don't like doing long haul where they're away for weeks at a time anyway.
Yeah.
We know that. They're impossible to find now. Mm-hmm. So theoretically, a large chunk of the driver population should be happier that now we don't have to worry about doing that kind of work anymore. That hasn't played out properly. But drivers, I think, are rightly concerned that, AI is going to take away the driving jobs, but it will not. And if it does, it won't be in our lifetimes for sure.
Recently, Steve Wozniak, who is one of the founders of Apple Computer, and this will sound very bad, he said, if you want to risk your life, go drive a Tesla with autopilot engaged. And that was a fairly recent, I don't know the year that he made that, but I believe that was a fairly recent comment that he made. I do think AI for that type of thing is really far in the future. It's going to assist drivers in the very near future, or the trucks today. Yeah. My car today is a pleasure to drive, I think, because it assists me. But I snickered when you said about the overheads. The odd time my car will engage the brakes when it sees a certain type of shadow, and it scares the bejesus out of me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if it's its own shadow.
Well, yeah. My point is, it's far from perfect at the moment in 2023.
Yeah.
Well, the Tesla, for example, is a level 2 autonomous assistant. Mm-hmm. Level 4 is basically full autonomy, and level 5 is just press the button and walk away. The truck will figure it out. So that's not even on the table yet. Level 4 are what these autonomous trucks are achieving now, but with a human in the seat still to pilot the thing around. But those trucks are technically level 4. The safety record on them is remarkable. There have been a couple of fender benders and one flat out weird crash where the truck all of a sudden just turned left. That was I understand anyway, the driver flipped the switch on and somehow the system reverted to the last state it was in when it was turned off, which was making a left turn. So he literally cranked left, the truck went into the guardrail and it got into a real mess. And there have been a couple of little fender benders involving other cars, but the cars have been at fault in those crashes. The truck just wasn't able to avoid it. If you look at the number, when you measure crashes, you usually use some metric like number of crashes per million miles or per 100,000 miles. These things are way below the human metric of number of crashes that human drivers are involved. But they're still worried about, those edge cases that they can't control for, a meteorite falls out of the sky or, sinkhole opens, not be able to cope with it.
Yeah.
But
or that airplane comes down.
Accident and crash mitigation and reduction, they're already way ahead of what human drivers.
Yeah, but with the human driver still behind the seat.
It's the subject matter. I'm sure Bill Gates and somebody out there is monitoring this going,
AI, we're going to give him more difficulties with technology.
Yeah, Elon Musk is watching.
Oh God, what a character! Anyways, you were saying
where
before
was I going?
Yeah,
what was
I said AI isn't perfect yet, and I don't think we're going to have driverless trucks. Certainly not in my lifetime.
Yeah. No, we won't. Well, yes, we will, but to a limited degree, like on the freeway. Yeah. That's probably a year or two out still. The humans are in the trucks now, not because they need to be for controlling the truck, but they're still monitoring what's going on. making sure the truck is doing what it's supposed to be doing. But again, the number of miles that they're collecting every day in these trials running between Phoenix and Texas, nothing's happening. Nothing's going wrong. But there will be those edge cases, hopefully, where the driver can intervene. But even if they didn't, I mean, here we're getting into moral and legal values. If you say, well, the truck is already demonstrably much better than a human driver, so let it go. And if you're an actuary and we're just looking at statistics, you'd probably go, well, yeah, I can't argue with this. But then as soon as something did go off the rails and you hit somebody, who do you sue?
Yeah.
You know, the OEM, the guy who wrote the program, it just.
Yeah. Sorry, Chris. Here's something I want to run by. Could you see the autonomous vehicles working in the fashion as we have in Ontario with the long combination vehicles? You know, we're running between 2 points, but we're not getting into the city with those long combinations. We're basically getting off at an exit, and we have an area close by that we would pool those trailers at. Could you see autonomous trucks getting into something like that? And then a local vehicle would in turn come and do the last mile deliveries or to the distribution center?
Well, that would be a good application for the technology, yeah. You can run it basically from Detroit right through to, I guess almost at Halifax now. Once they get that stretch in Quebec opened up, which isn't too far down the road. Literally, it's 4-lane highway all the way from Detroit to Halifax.
Right.
Yeah.
All you need to do is put in a fueling depot somewhere, and you can get a truck that make that whole trip without ever stopping.
And as you said, likely safer.
LCV, I don't see that as a deal breaker.
Yeah.
I would think with an LCV, the more technology, the better. I mean, because if they wreck, and in most cases, if they do wreck, it's not the driver's fault, but it was the four-wheeler who caused the driver to make certain reactions. And if what you're saying about AI is all true, and I have no reason to doubt it, then it would be a great application.
Well, there's a technology now they're based in Pittsburgh called Locomation.
Right.
And their shtick is to have, I don't even know why they're bothering with this platooning anymore. Anyway, a driver in the lead truck, in one truck, followed closely by a driver in a second truck. And the second truck basically follows the first one. So you've got a human steering the first truck and, for trials purposes, a driver in the second truck, but it wouldn't need to be there. Right. It just followed along behind the other one.
Sure.
Well,
so that's as close to LCVing as we've gotten so far with autonomous technology, as far as I know.
I read an article over in Germany. I believe they did platooning, but with 5 vehicles. It worked very well, but there was obviously a complaint that the car drivers, all of a sudden 5 53-footers in a row, makes passing a real challenge.
Yeah, that's not practical. No, and you still got 5 power units, right?
Yeah, but the fuel savings were tremendous. That's what they were looking at, because as you know, platooning, the second vehicle saves some fuel. But what they found out was the first vehicle saved fuel as well, not as much as the other ones, but the ones in between, 2, 3, and 4 saved the most. The back one saved some, and then the front one saved the least, but they all saved, which is kind of neat.
Cool.
Well, my argument with platooning is, why bother? We're allowed LCVs. Yeah. You've only got one power unit, so your fuel savings are like, what is it? 30% over the difference of running 2 tractors. You say just one tractor. Yeah, its fuel consumption is higher. One tractor pulling 2 trailers. It's got higher fuel consumption than that one single tractor would have, but only like 30% higher. So your savings are pretty remarkable.
A huge efficiency there. Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
And
those
really
crazy Americans, they're all bent out of shape about triaxle trailers, 96,000 pounds. Oh my God, everything will come crashing down on us. One thing that drives me nuts about, the U.S. in general, is they are all over this, decarbonizing thing. Not getting a little off track here, but okay, here's a solution. LCVs, cut your fuel consumption by 30-40% over 2 trucks. Isn't that decarbonizing? Oh yeah, but it's too dangerous. You can't do that. It's too long. It's too heavy. It's too this. It's too that. Give me a break. The railroads are behind all that.
I was going to say, it's already happening on the New York Thruway, the Mass Thruway.
They've been doing it for decades. But the problem with New York is you're limited to 48-foot trailers.
Yes.
Oh, really? Okay.
The ICE-T regulation from like 1998 or something capped the size of those trucks to 48 feet. But where can you even buy a 48-foot trailer these days?
Exactly. Yeah. And it'll all be old. It'll all be 10-year-old trailers and equipment for sure.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
Jim,
anyway,
as
we're
we
getting off track there.
No, this is all really good stuff. But what else? We got to wrap this interview up in a few minutes. What else is coming down that a truck driver or a trucking company owner would want to know about safety as it might be implanted into a vehicle?
Well, I think there's a growing trend now to use cameras and AI-based alerts and warnings.
Right.
Talking driver-facing and forward-facing cameras here at this point. But baking some AI into those algorithms where they can get a bit more predictive rather than just reactive. But then I've seen systems, and only a couple of different brands, where they have voices that come on and say, driver, you're following too close, or you're driving too fast, or, they've got technology now that will look into your eyes and see the size of your pupils and whether your eyes are darting back and forth quickly enough, and then decide arbitrarily, or maybe based on the evidence, that you're fatigued and you should maybe get off the road. Some of this stuff is, to me, I'm old school and paranoid, but invasive beyond the need, if you know what I mean. What can you do with a camera feed that's looking at my eyeballs all day, all night long, staring at my face, watching me pick my teeth or pick my nose or scratch my nether regions? There's no safeguards for driver privacy at this point. I mean, this is still the Wild West. The camera suppliers will say, well, if the red light's not on, it's not recording. Yeah? Bullshit. Pardon me. If the camera exists, it can be recording, red light or not.
Right. And we were having this debate. I did a driver meeting on Saturday, and I was surprised that the company I was working for didn't have any dash cams. I was very surprised at that. Never mind forward-facing or driver-facing. And what you're talking about is the next level. In my car, I have a driver-facing dash cam, and I activated it. But it's not telling me, and I'm still in control of it, I guess. I hope Elon's not sending it all the But again, to your point, I don't know what they're doing. They say it's only going to my hard drive on my car, but how in the heck do I know that?
You don't. And what happens to it once it hits your hard drive?
Well, I'm supposed to be in control of it because it's my hard drive.
No, it's actually theirs. You're just paying to use it.
Well, no, this is I've got a 1 terabyte external hard drive that I plugged into the USB port, right?
Gotcha.
So
okay, sorry.
That one is mine, but still it's going through their interface, through their camera to my device. That could be intercepted and sent anywhere. Like I said to the drivers on Saturday, but I didn't have the same knowledge that you've got. I said, but every workplace now has cameras in. But to your point, the cameras in a workplace aren't looking at my eyeballs,
No.
aren't staring at my face 100% of the time. So you've made me just think more about the topic as you said that.
The big problem is, and the American Transportation Research Institute just released a study on driver cameras, reporting, not surprisingly, that drivers don't like them. But it's those safeguards. It's what's protecting that data from eyes that don't need to see it. In the airlines, for example, in aviation, they have the cockpit voice recorder and they have the flight data recorders. Well, the flight data recorders run 24/7, and that information is uploaded to some server somewhere all the time. The cockpit voice recorders only run for 30 minutes. I think some are up to 2 hours now. But if you complete a flight and there's no incident, the cockpit voice recorder records over itself. It erases everything that's on that tape. Well, not a tape anymore, but so if the pilots get into a conversation about how, what a turkey their boss is, or they start talking about their wives or finances or, whatever you might want to talk about, two fellows sitting in a cockpit for 2 hours or 4 hours, nobody will ever hear that conversation unless the plane crashes. So in a truck, apply the similar logic. If you driving from A to B and nothing ever happens, the recording's uploaded as you travel, or it can be in some models. It doesn't reside on the truck, and it can't be deleted by the driver at the end of the trip if nothing happens. So where is your protection against that sort of probing and prying? People have no business hearing what goes on in a private conversation, but unless it's protected or there's some safeguards built into the system, force these things to overwrite after a period of time if there's no incident. It's easy enough to do.
And to your point, a plane falling out of the sky has a black box that survives that crash. I'm sure that's much more, the G-force and all that kind of stuff has to be much more than a truck crash. Therefore, we already have the technology to contain it on a truck and have it later on should we need it, as opposed to uploading it to a server. Good. See, you got me thinking, Jim. I love that.
Well, they paid me the big bucks.
Well, thank God you come on to this show for free, but I think that's a great place to wrap it up. Gosh darn, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Mr. Park. What a great future we have coming down the pipe. And Jim made me think of an awful lot of stuff. So, Jim, the trucking independent journalist, thanks for coming on the Trucking Risk and Insurance podcast. We'll see you again soon.